you get to engage with actually generating arousal. And then as a man, you get to feel like, when am I aroused? What is my system responding to? And in truth, it is none of the parameters we usually think it is. Usually you think the hotter the woman, you're turned on. It just isn't the case. It isn't the
Yeah.
looks, it isn't the age, it isn't who you think across the room, oh, that woman is hot. And I believe the real reason is actually something more internal and a little more mysterious. I think the real reason of how arousal actually works is a bit energetic. And energetic, we already, if you say it's energetic, it kind of ends up in woo-woo land because now we really can't measure it objectively. Like just as you described, you have two women in the same oming circle, one elder, the other woman is young and hot, and yet your system is responding to one and your system is not responding to the other.
So last time I was in New York, we got some guys together at the sauna. I know Joseph, you couldn't make it, but there was an interesting thread between Ohm and one of our other friends about an experiment and basically how women affect male arousal, which I thought was very interesting. And Ohm, if you would like to speak on it.
Well, the basic theory is this. We've done a lot of sensuality work, a lot of sensuality training. One of them being stroking, in the one taste modality, Morehouse modality of hand to genital stimulation from man to women. And men often notice that they can have a beautiful session with a woman, they can take her into beautiful arousal, but more often than not, they don't get erections while that's going on. So it's always been a point of curiosity, like what triggers a man's erection? That you could be stimulating a woman, she could definitely be in a state of arousal, genuine arousal, having a great time. You're creating that arousal in her system. You are obviously in a very sensual engagement with the woman, and yet bulk of the time there is no erection, and then once in a while there is an erection. And so the curiosity is, once you do this for a long time, like what is happening? When is the erection happening? When is it not happening?
Yeah, because it doesn't have to necessarily do with how the woman looks, which is like the shocker, I think, for most men initially. You just
Yeah,
assume that a hot woman gets you hard, and
yeah, absolutely zero factor. Women's looks has nothing to do with it. Yeah,
Yes,
the
well, that
question was, well, what is the trigger? Because the look certainly isn't it. You could have a beautiful woman, you could have a woman you find attractive, you could have a woman you find less attractive. It doesn't seem to be a factor. Not
well
any
one of
direct
my
correlation that we have observed.
my best stories from one taste, and it was like a mind shattering moment. Was I went to an Ohm circle without any previous partners lined up, and you get there at the circle and typically look around like who's hot, like who do I want to Ohm with, and I saw someone that I thought was very attractive, and I went and asked, do you want to Ohm? And she was like, I have a 1, I'll be your number 2. And I said,
Yeah.
okay. And then I had a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, and it's a woman. She was not there very long, and but she had come a few times. She was like a very old lady. She was like, I would guess she was like 70 years old. She was very
Yeah.
wrinkly, very skinny. She
Yeah.
was she had an accent from Eastern Europe, and I was sort of like in my head. I was like trying not struggling with my my internal reaction, like I don't want this, like I don't want to Ohm with her. Wait, why is she even here? She shouldn't be here. Like she's too old, and you know
Yeah.
all of these things that came up in my brain and my system, and we ohmed, and in the middle of that I realized, holy shit, I'm turned on. I'm really turned on.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was like it was a really big moment for me. And then afterwards, I had the ohm with the other woman, and it was
Yeah.
just very flat, and I was not turned on, and I was
Yeah.
bored.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences where this is why we are enough of sex geeks to actually have this conversation. I don't know how many other people are qualified to have this conversation. We have done enough oming sessions. I've done enough tantra sessions in the Charles Muir modality, other things, and So it's like you get to engage with bodies, you get to engage with actually generating arousal. And then as a man, you get to feel like, when am I aroused? And what is my system responding to? And in truth, it is none of the parameters we usually think it is. Usually you think the hotter the woman, you're turned on. It just isn't the case. It
Mm-hmm.
isn't the
Yeah.
looks, it isn't the age, it isn't who you think across the room, oh, that woman is hot. And I believe the real reason is actually something more internal and a little more mysterious. I think the real reason of how arousal actually works is a bit energetic. And energetic, we already, if you say it's energetic, it kind of ends up in woo-woo land because now we really can't measure it objectively. Like just as you described, you have two women in the same homing circle. One elderly, you're like, that woman looks like a grandmother. I don't even want to stroke her. The other woman is young and hot, and I want to get my hands on her. And yet your system is responding to one, and your system is not responding to the other. And I don't think it has anything to do with the attraction. I would not like put you on the couch, for instance, and say, I think you have attraction to older women, and let's
Right.
talk
Yeah.
about it. I think it's all
Right.
nonsense. I don't
Right.
think it's got anything to do with any of that. I think it has
Yeah.
to do with an other X factor, which has to do with the woman's internal arousal, with her turn on, with her energetics, and the masculine system responds to that. And what that is, I think, is still a mystery. I think
Mm.
there's a Nobel Prize sitting in there someplace. I don't
Mm.
think we understand arousal very clearly. I don't think we
Yeah.
understand what generates what is the masculine responding to in the feminine. We think it's looks
Yeah.
and youth and beauty. I really don't. It certainly is a factor. It may be a factor in who we want to go over and talk to, but arousal itself, I will throw down this gauntlet. Men have not had the best sex of their life with the most beautiful women they have been with
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
across the board. Across the board.
Yeah, I
Beauty's
was
got
actually
nothing to do with
sharing
it.
with you.
Yeah.
I was sharing with you guys at the sauna. There's a particular woman who I wasn't super attracted to her visually, and I actually found her very annoying, but
Yeah.
had this crazy effect that it was like inexplicable. And actually, this whole thing, like especially for me, I entered one taste because I had erectile dysfunction. Like that was like the thing that really made me throw caution to the wind and go fully deep into it. And it
Right.
was a shocker for me, having not had an erection without Viagra for over a year, probably when I entered, that there were some women I couldn't help getting aroused by with my clothes on. And like just like you're saying, it's not who I would have expected. And actually, this is leading into a question for you guys because there's two kinds of women I noticed gave me this response pretty consistently. One was the highly trained women, like usually the instructors who had some ability they could control. And
Yep.
then there was kind of like the woman I just mentioned who didn't know what they were doing. They weren't doing anything intentional, but there's something about them that just causes this. And I would, in a very simplistic terms, I would say there's something about being ultra feminine or ultra submissive, like something about like going so deep into that role that I couldn't help having a physical response.
Yeah. It's well, it's something about, but it's not. I don't think it's justice. Like what you were saying. Most of the girl. It's not every woman that is very very hot. Like some of the women that I've been with that have been very very attractive, conventionally attractive, have been have been. I don't know how if this is how we want to frame it, but like have been like connected to their pleasure.
Right.
Is that
Yeah.
that simple? They that are in sort of approval of their pleasure. Maybe but I don't think that necessarily is the only part of it. But and then a lot of these really really hot women have been like totally performative, disconnected. Like it's like secondary experience of pleasure through my pleasure, some kind of mimicry of porn
Yeah.
or like what they think is hot, but it isn't actually quite accurate. It's like not hitting the bullseye. Uh, and I'm thinking even like we had that in one case. Like there were women who they came into the the program and they're like even during an Om, they're like screaming with pleasure, and the whole room is kind of like, Jesus, what, and they
Yeah.
think that seems great to everybody, and everyone's going, this is a lot of performance. Like
It was a
this
lot of
is
performance. When at the few times I was running the oming circle, I would actually encourage those women to shut the fuck up.
right. Yeah.
Because the truth is, after you've been around this for a while, you can hear genuine sounds from fake sounds.
Right. Exactly.
And women play all kinds of games in rooms like that. Women often make sounds just to kill each other.
Right. No, and in the where I live, in the at the parties and stuff, the room, there's many, there's all kinds of noise and scenes going on, and very few of them, to me, I always found myself kind of like feeling a little bit left out or crazy, because I'm walking around going, like nothing in here is really that interesting. Like it's all kind of like it's like playing tennis or something, like with each other, and it doesn't really grab me, you know.
Right.
Um, but I also think, though, like what you said, Ruan, like, is she in her feminine? Is she extremely feminine? Is she submissive? Is she a good I would like maybe a comment from Om about this, but like I don't think it's like simply being extremely submissive isn't a turn on to me either. Like that doesn't also seem to me like, like extreme submission and subbiness is like a turn on necessarily either. Like there's like a sweet spot somewhere.
Well, I don't know. I would actually disagree. I would say the best I have found is that a woman receptive to the masculine and submissive is what creates a response in the masculine. And I don't think it's even our preference.
Mm.
I'm actually not talking about preferences. I think this phenomenon actually is something independent of preference.
Uh-huh,
This is
uh-huh.
what I'm saying. I don't think it's like I prefer submissive women, so I get turned on by submissive women. That would be like saying I like blondes and I get turned on by blondes. There might be some factor in that preference, but I think the phenomenon we are talking about is actually something, I don't know. I think it's
Like a
really
cat in heat.
mammalian. It's it's it's
Yeah.
Right.
it's it's something very mammalian.
Well, it makes me think of certain people in our past have made statements like, is it like, is it a woman saying basically, or transmitting like, I want to be eaten, like I want you to tear my throat out, kind of thing.
Well, I would say I don't know about being beaten, but I would say definitely I want to be
No, not,
fucked,
yeah, not beaten. I mean, eaten, like
eaten. Okay,
Consumed.
consumed.
consumed,
Yeah.
Yeah,
devoured. I
yeah,
think
Yeah.
I think it
devoured.
is. I think there is a primal energy. I think the primal energy might be the key. That I want to be taken, I want to be ravaged, and in that frequency, it's a closest hypothesis I have that that's the frequency that when women go to it, men get aroused, men get erect.
Yeah, I'll say subjectively, when I've really felt this, it's clear to me that if I do what feels good to me, not only will it be okay with her, but she's going to get off on that specifically. And then it's like, well, I can definitely do what I want, and anything I do is a green light. There's something about that that has really lit me up consistently.
I think there's an energy in there of the man feeling just being found right, which
Ah,
can be really
yes.
hot, where the woman is just receiving him so completely that he feels with this woman I can do no wrong. And I think
Yes.
that may be a factor. I felt that even more in the BDSM realm when a woman truly is in her submission and a submissive is really in her groove. She's like, I am in just such a happy space. Just do whatever you want. And every
Yeah.
dom who has done scenes knows that space, and it's delightful space to be in because you feel you're winning as a man, you feel received by the feminine, and just feel correct. You feel you're
Yeah.
winning. So that
So,
might be a factor. I don't know if that is the arousal factor in it.
Hmm.
so question for you guys.
So let me throw this in. I have noticed this in my long-term marriage of 34 years, and I've certainly coached enough men As soon as women start disrespecting their men, they start cutting them down, they start insulting them, men don't want to fuck their women anymore. In fact, their erections disappear. Vast majority of the time. I think if a man is feeling cut down by the woman, something in his system goes, I'm not putting my dick in this woman. And the dick doesn't cooperate. It's like, why are
Yeah.
we fucking this woman? So
Yeah.
this is the
That's
whole
it.
point of women being boss bitches and doming their men and bossing their men around or insulting their men or poking their men and cutting their men. I'm like, you're fucking up your own sex life. Don't complain to me after this point. He doesn't want to fuck me. Why would he? And I don't think it's even a matter of choice. I think that happens at the energetic level. That it is
Uh-huh.
the opposite of the man being received by his woman. It is the opposite of a woman submitting to a man. And his system basically goes, this is the wrong woman to fertilize. This is the wrong woman to fuck.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was just going to bring up how, we were first speaking about there's certain types of women or certain qualities of women. But as we know in long-term relationships, two people may have had the best sex of their lives when they got together, resentment builds up, and they find out they don't
Yeah.
want to have sex with a person. They still find physically attractive. Like,
Yes.
what is it, and I think you answered this already, but like, what is it that a woman is, say, doing versus not doing that makes her fuckable?
Yeah. There are plenty. Just on that note, I can tell you I've coached a lot of couples, uh, and the woman's attraction has hardly ever been a factor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if one or once or twice, maybe. But vast majority of the time, it is not. It's not the stopping point that the man says, "I don't find her attractive anymore. She's gotten too old or too fat."
Okay, so question for you guys. On the other side of things, how how much control or influence does a man have? Because I'm thinking again back to One Taste days. There was a time where I kind of felt like I could only sleep with trained women, so to speak, or turned on women, because
Yeah,
regular women I just didn't respond. And One Taste gave a framework where it wasn't my fault, it was the woman's get off, and I kind of maybe used it as a protection mechanism. I don't know. But then I realized, well, most women I just don't get turned on with, and this doesn't really
yeah,
work either. And I did have a moment, like towards the end of my time in One Taste, where I realized there's something I can do in the same way a trained woman would make me feel like a man, and that's what made me put me in my body essentially. There's like a counterplay to that, and this is kind of when I met you, where I was learning about dominance for the first time. Like there's things that I can do that maybe influence her to do that, which then influences my arousal.
yeah.
If you get like, yeah.
Oh, that circuit is very, very true. That circuit I have noticed very often in BDSM play where I can, I as a Dom am leading the scene and my dominance puts her in her submission puts her in her arousal turns me hard.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely a circuit going on. So it's not like I'm waiting for her to go into her zone. My dominance very much puts her there, right? And then her system in turn creates a response in my system. So I think that circuit is a fun circuit. It's a good circuit to utilize. I think it's a very
Yeah.
cool
Yeah.
circuit. Yeah.
So the complementary, the
Yeah, so I mean,
complementary.
let me insert this before just to make the point. So this is something to be a little bit explicit because I was running this experiment with our friend we talked about, and the
Mhm.
woman also shared. She says, "Yeah, but sometimes I get turned on by feeling you're turned on." A simple
Yeah.
example of that is we are sleeping together. I feel your cock against my ass.
Mm-hmm.
And your cock is only semi-hard, but I feel your cock against my ass. That really turns me on. And now I want to be fucked and I'm turned down. And in turn, now you get harder. So it
Yeah.
started with
Yeah.
the man's arousal and the woman feeling desired. And then it increases her arousal, which in turn increases his arousal. So I don't think it is just one arc. I think it can be a nice loop.
Well, it's almost like that. I've heard it framed like in the tantric community, like the tantric uh, taking pleasure. Like taking pleasure is it give that is it that taking pleasure gives permission to have pleasure, and then having pleasure gives permission to take pleasure in turn again, like sort of like
Yeah,
a circuit like that.
right.
Could you
Yeah,
explain what you mean by taking pleasure, just for those who might
Well,
not?
that's that that idea, like you sort of sketched it, Ruan. Like if you're in your pleasure and you're going like this part of me feels good doing this thing, then it's going to transmit that. It's going to transmit that it feels good. You're going to take that pleasure, and it's going to be it's going to be an invitation in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me think of I did a tantra training, like a basic tantra training sometime. This is after One Taste, where they went over Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. I assume you guys are familiar.
Yeah.
And they made the 4 quadrants, and they wanted the whole class to go into the quadrant that represented them. It's like there's giving and receiving, and then there's taking and allowing. Those are like the two pairings. And almost everyone, all the men and almost everyone else went into giving. A few women who are very in their feminine went into receiving. Maybe 1 or 2 really kinky women went into the allowing, and like it was me and this one lesbian in the taking. And I'm like, oh, you guys are lying. Like, there's no way. Right. There's no way this is the truth. And honestly, this is only because I had training in One Taste, and I was educated in the things we're talking about. It's like, no, actually the real thing for a typical heterosexual male that really turns them on is taking. The giving is just to make yourself seem like a feminist.
The nice guy syndrome.
Yeah.
That's what all those guys are giving.
Yeah. I mean, I think the simpler term I prefer to use is kind of tapping into the ravagement energy of being taken, taking and being taken, being ravaged, being ravished. That's a frequency we often play with in BDSM play, and I think it has a lot of turn on and arousal in it. Mm-hmm. Right? And that is kind of that dominant, submissive, kind of really mammalian energy. Right? It is kind of forceful. I heard Louis C.K. tell this bit. This is little bit politically incorrect, so bear with me. It's a joke. But Louis C.K. in one of his skits says, every time I watch the Nature Channel and I watch animals having sex, it basically looks like the male is just raping the female. But I think what he's observing is like, in the mammalian kingdom, there is aggression. There is taking.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think there is rape in the mammalian kingdom. I think the females actually are very choosy. Like the prototypical example of that would be rams fighting, 2 male rams bashing away at each other while the female just stands coyly on the side.
Yeah.
Right? And then the winner goes over and she submits. She stands there. She gives him her ass. And then he mounts her. But the whole thing is like, obviously it is consensual, but it is aggressive. It is based in aggression. Aggression precedes sex.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, all of this, because this stuff doesn't fit culture. And no matter how culture forms, it's something that's like way older than culture, perhaps from pre-human roots. Like, and there's so many examples from nature, but like, you know about the cat penises being barbed. Yeah. And actually, I mean, there's one, I used to raise betta fish, they're the fighting fish. Their mating ritual is the male chases the female, sometimes breaks her spine and gets the eggs out. But if he needs to catch the female, it's like if he's not fast enough to catch the female, he doesn't mate and he gets weeded out. And it's, I don't know, it's just really gnarly and it doesn't fit any like happy narrative sometimes.
Right.
Well, nature's nature. Just observe it and do with it what you will. I mean, it's not for us to judge it.
Yeah.
And how much of that translates to human beings, I don't know. I think it's at least good to hypothesize this might be the case. That in mammalian systems, usually when the female comes into estrus, the males respond with erections. That's the common modality. I grew up in India. We have stray dogs all over the place. We watch dogs mating all the time, and you will see this. The female dogs will come into heat, and the male dogs all of them would come around. All of them would respond to the female dog, and oftentimes she would mate with multiple of them. And as kids, you observe this going on, right? And this is very mammalian. I think in the primate species, in monkeys, it's very common that a female comes into estrus. And then there might be other things that go on. Maybe there's an alpha male that keeps other males from approaching the female, but certainly all males know the female is in heat and they come over and their bodies are ready. And that's kind of the way the system works. The female comes into estrus and the male responds. And I'm like, we are primates. How are we? It's very, very sensible to hypothesize our systems might work the same way, right? Maybe not identical. There's good research that there is a phenomena around when women are ovulating. Their smell changes, their appearance changes, and men respond to them differently. So it's
Yeah,
like it is a
they
phenomenon
respond differently.
Yeah.
Their
that
own
they
preferences
become more
change
attractive,
also.
more youthful, more girly, whatever changes are. Their breasts become bigger, and men obviously are more attractive to them. They become a notch more attractive,
And
sexier.
their preferences also change during
Their
Yeah,
ovulation.
preferences change. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah,
They said their preferences change markedly from ovulation to when they have their period. They literally choose alpha and beta males in the from the middle to the end of the cycle. I'm like, well, that's very telling. Who
yeah,
they want them to fertilize and who they want around to raise the kid might be two different men. This might be part of the human evolution, and we are still struggling with it. Like, how can women want to fuck bad boys, but then they want to settle down with nice guys? What the hell is going on here? And you're like, it may be built right into the biology. Get 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 the sperm on ovulation day, and then settle down with a nice guy a week later. Who knows?
yeah. So I'd imagine a woman listening to this, maybe who is good looking, but for some reason doesn't have, or for whatever reason, like she's just not getting the male response that she wants, and she's trying all the conventional understanding things. She's good looking, she's being nice to her partner, or being nice to men, or whatever she thinks. What could be laid out as takeaways?
You're trying to get women laid? I don't think women have any trouble getting laid.
I disagree. No, I mean, well, not the getting laid part, but especially with all the experiences we've had, I could think of so many women, some friends of ours, who are very good looking, but for some reason guys have trouble getting up with or like at least earlier in their education, and this kind of issue occurs.
Listen, I would tell women your receptivity is a massive factor in attracting the masculine. Finding men right, you don't have to find every man right, but find the man that you can find right. Find the man that you can find right, find the man that you can approve of, find the man that you can really receive, and that does amazing things to the psyches of men. Men want to really give to those women. Men want to be with those women. Men want to provide for those women. Right? I think it's a huge factor for us.
Yeah. Yeah, this might actually lead into next week's topic, so I won't go too deep into it, but I think there's like a big non-sexual application in how much like intangible energy, if you will, a woman can give a man. Obviously with arousal we're speaking, but like when my wife sees me as strong or capable or something, I can fix things around the house, or I have the motivation to do things that I would never, ever in a million years do for myself. It's like she just like gives me that, she like juices me, and then I could fix the friggin' whatever, ceiling fixture. And it's like women have so much power in that sense of controlling the strings.
I think it's a circuit, though. I think male competence is a huge turn on for women. I've
yes,
literally heard these conversations multiple times from lawyer women, from women whose husbands were professors. Women have specifically said, I'd never watched my husband at work, but then he was giving a lecture, or he was giving a speech, or he was winning an award, and I was there. And when he got up on the stage and he started speaking, and he was holding the whole room, and people were
yeah,
laughing at his joke, and everybody stood up to applaud him,
yeah,
I've never wanted to fuck him more.
yeah,
And I'm like, this is a woman standing on the back of the room who's like walked in with this man, married to him for however many years, but like looking through at your man through other people's eyes and seeing that he's esteemed by other people and he's considered competent and brilliant by other people is like, that's my man. Let's jump him. So I think that tells a lot. That speaks oodles. Women will say that watching a man in his competence is really a turn on. Women have joked to me like, you would think women are always into uniforms. Women have told me, "Oh, just a man in a tool belt." I'm like, what is it with you women? What is it with you women? So he says it isn't like it's a fetish object. It's competence. It's a man can do shit. He's doing things. He's getting things done. He has ability, and that just is a natural turn on for women. I had a moment like that. Let me confess, I had a very silly moment like this. I was in India with a group of our friends. We were on a group trip. I think pretty much everybody else in our group was a woman. This is the moment. We are like six of us in a stuffed in a car, and I'm in the front seat, and obviously I'm the only one in the car who speaks Hindi among our people. So people are coming up, and I'm just speaking Hindi, asking for directions, being polite, making conversation, and the woman in the back is like, "There is just something so hard about that." I'm like, "What? Speaking Hindi?" It's like, "No, just competence. Like we can rely on you to just get things done. Otherwise, we would be jabbering here for 15 minutes, making hand signs, trying to communicate. And the fact that you're just there in the front seat and people are smiling at you and you're talking at them politely and they are cordial to you and on we go is like, God damn, that's a turn on. And that's not a sexy thing, but it is competence. And I think that is a really genuine switch in the feminine brain. Men who can
Yeah.
get shit done. It's really powerful. I believe that may even be like the thing about women like dangerous men or gangsters. I'm like only because they're more effective.
Mm-hmm.
They're just more effective because
Mm-hmm.
people respond to them quickly. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
scene in Goodfellas, the famous long scene where he comes to the back of the restaurant and they set up a table for him up front. It's not that he's just important, it's that people respond to him and he can get things done. And all of a sudden, she looks at this man is like, "Who the hell are you?" Right? She's turned on by it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, survival. Yeah, there's an essay by G.K. Chesterton I'm going to share with you guys to speak about more next week, but he has a bit in there because he's writing at a time where women were just starting to work and women's suffrage was like the hot topic of the day. And he was speaking about how he felt that it's unnatural for women to work because when you see a woman as a secretary, she falls in love with her employer and treats him like her husband. And he wasn't even talking about affairs or anything because he was very Christian conservative. But he was
Yeah.
basically saying like the employer becomes the man in charge of her survival. His success determines whether or not she eats. So of course she's going to fall in love with him. Of course she's
Yeah.
going to be devoted in the way
Yeah.
that traditionally it would be for her father or her husband.
And I think it's a very valid hypothesis. Kevin Samuels used to talk about this. He would say women should work for their men. You should, if you want to work, don't go work for some strange man. Don't give your time and resources to him. Work for your man. Do his accounting. Do his books. Help him with his business. Because that way you get to see him making money, you get to see him being effective, you get to see him being an authority figure, and you get to contribute to his life. And you're actually useful to him instead of spending 8 hours a day with a strange man. And yeah, and I think there's something to that actually. I think there's something really to that. And the amount of uh, affairs and the falling in love that happens between secretaries and bosses is quite large.
Mm-hmm.
Infatuations do happen over there. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a madman world.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's almost built in, like it
It
sort of
is.
comes
Most
par for the
most
course.
women end up looking up to their bosses a lot more than they look up to their own man, and that in itself is a not a great thing,
Right. Yeah.
right? They look up to those bosses because they are important people. They get things done in the world, and they look up to them. They obey them. They obey their bosses. They don't obey their husbands. They jump to their feet. They are proactive in taking the care of their needs of their bosses. They're not proactive in taking care of needs of their husbands. And
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
well, all this good energy should be going to your man instead of a stranger.
Yeah, and the flip side, using the madman trope, is the men find their secretaries more attractive because they're not getting the back talk, they're not getting the rejection, the
Yeah,
resentment, the criticism that they probably get from their wife.
Yeah, they get to really delegate, they get to dominate, they get to have their instructions followed. They get to be respected. They get to be respected in the hierarchy. Right? Like I don't want every fucking thing I say questioned. Just fucking do it. Right? And I think there's something to it. I mean, why do you want to question your husband so much when you never question your boss? Why don't you trust your husband's wisdom and intelligence at least as much as you trust your boss's intelligence and authority? It's a valid question.
Yeah. I guess superficially he's giving a paycheck. So that's kind of like anchored in our modern
Well,
society.
the
where money
husband is contributing a lot to the wife as well. And if you don't think the husband is worthy of your respect, don't marry that particular man. Right? Marry a man that you respect. And then offer him that respect, and your relationship will go a lot better.
Yeah. Probably the trouble is in most cases the decision is made during non-ovulation time or most of the month where they want the easier and more convenient
in my
guy.
opinion, I would blame that squarely on the culture. Respecting your man and husband has gone out of fashion. Nitpicking and handpicking your husband and criticizing him is in fashion. If 5 friends are over for dinner and you obey your husband, they'll look down on you. And if you're cutting him down, they'll think, okay, you're a normal wife. That's modern world today. Right? If you actually encounter a couple where the woman is submissive, you will notice it. You will significantly notice it. I did. About a year or so ago, I went to dinner, friends of friends, right? Wonderful couple, professionals, middle-aged. The man was black, the woman was white. And the woman was markedly warm and submissive and respectful to her man. And it was so noticeable in the room. And she wasn't like bowing down and getting down on her knees or anything. She just had just a tiny measure of deference towards her husband. And that tiny measure of deference sticks out in a room. Like, oh my God. A woman who does not raise her voice at her man, who does not criticize her man, when her man says, let's do it this way, she says, yes, dear. Like, whoa. Not big things. Not really big things. But it's like there's no argument. Like friction and contradiction is not our modus operandi. Agreement and deference is our modus operandi in this household. And it was sweet and it was functional and it was very noticeable. You don't see it in most households. Certainly not in New York, where women are the bosses. Okay. Women are supposed to be abrasive. I don't know who's enjoying that, but it seems to be the fashion of the day.
Yeah.
Men declaring their wives as the bosses of the house seems to be like the man has to kind of make that joke at the beginning of the evening. Like she's the one who wears the pants. I'm like, that's actually not funny anymore. Cut that shit out, really.
Yeah. You know, I was actually thinking the other day about how vulnerable dominance is. Because even in the setting that you're speaking about, like to live in New York, to have your, typical New York liberal friends over, and to say the opposite, or like to command your wife, it's like a certain amount of tension. One, opening yourself up to criticism, and also if you're wrong, you get kind of doubly punished, as opposed to in a culture where it's expected that the man makes decisions and sometimes makes mistakes.
It's true. It is not really popular to be a dominant man these days at all. Whereas being a dominant
and you better do it perfectly.
Woman, and you better always be right, and you be always, certainly. But being a bitchy, abrasive woman is like, that's just strong woman. Anyway.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's working for most people.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about connecting it to the other thing that you mentioned, Ruwan, the AI partners, and how that would play into that. Like, where's the dynamic landing in that?
Yeah. Yeah, we brought it up last week of like specifically the guys who are winning 0 with women. whether they have interactions with women or not, those are obviously the guys who would go for it. And maybe a guy who's frustrated, divorced, a string of women who made him wrong all the time, maybe it just feels like on an emotional level rewarding to be with some feminine figure that makes him right.
So, yeah, I would love to give my 2 cents on this, right? I don't know about the other guys and what they're going to do. Let me tell you what I would do. You want me to design my AI girlfriend? I would design an AI girlfriend who is brilliant, who's smart. If I can make her smarter than me, I will. Who can correct me every time I'm wrong, who can advise me every time she has something good advice to give me, and she will be feminine, she will be soft, she will be gracious, she will be gentle in her speaking, she will be friendly, she will be kind. I want the whole package. I don't need a bitchy woman to be a smart woman. I don't believe in this combination. It's a nonsense combination that for a
Yeah.
woman to be smart and educated and have a postgraduate degree, she needs to be a cunt. She really doesn't. Feminine graciousness is not in conflict with feminine competence. This is a nonsense concept feminism has sold to women. Be
Hmm.
abrasive, be nasty, be the nasty women. That's what strong women are. Not really. There
Hmm.
is no conflict between feminine strength and feminine graciousness. There is no conflict between you having a beautiful body, great tits, wearing a Prada dress, and having 3 degrees on the wall and being 20 points over IQ over your husband. Have all of it. Why do we always need brilliant women to be nasty women, abrasive women, aggressive women? This is a made up idea. It's really not true. It's not necessary at
Yeah, it's
all.
the big ironic thing of feminism that it runs on a male value system
It does.
because because it's economically driven too. And I could see like how it's played out, right? Like women started voting, women started working, women started earning their own money, getting the same education. But how do you compete with all the men in the world of business? Is you be
Don't
abrasive, you
compete
be
with the men.
disagreeable.
Don't compete
Well,
with them.
that's the
This
way
is the
our
no,
system
no,
is
no,
set up
no. I see.
economically.
I will challenge that proposition. The way the ideal, the temperament that has been sold to women is the temperament of the aggressive, disagreeable alpha male,
Right.
which is a bad sell.
It's
I
dumb.
mean, even the disagreeable alpha males are not always successful leaders. This
Right.
idea that successful male leaders are abrasive assholes is a misconception. The best leaders oftentimes are very gentle and peacemakers and they're father figures and they love everybody and they take care of everybody and they have authority,
Right. Because,
right?
and exactly, just like in men, just like in women, those behaviors you're talking about are often compensatory.
They
They're
are.
they're they're covering over a deficit in intelligence or a deficit in bandwidth or capacity, and it's the
Yeah.
same with women. Guess who buys into that that story the most? Dumb women.
Oftentimes women who probably are not that competent. Yeah,
Right.
I don't really believe in that model. I That's not the model of leadership I would encourage men to embody.
Right.
The best men are not abrasive assholes. They are strong, they can be firm, but they don't have an axe to grind. Confident men don't look like that. They actually look very calm. They get respected because of that,
I would
right?
say, and this is tying to our narcissist conversation, there is something in the abrasiveness that most people, and we can call them more sheep like people, do respond to, which is why it gets rewarded in society, which is why women then model that archetype of masculinity versus the better one that you guys are talking about.
I think having access to one's abrasiveness and disagreeableness is important. If and when you need it, you have it. But if that's your walking, talking modus operandi, I think it is an overkill,
Hmm.
even in men.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't think
Okay,
it's really needed. And there are
I
many
want to bring
authority
us.
figures. You know, Joseph's a therapist. And as a therapist, you're an authority figure. You want your patients to respect you, you want your parents to listen to you, but it is better if his temperament is actually soft and fatherly. He doesn't need to be abrasive, he doesn't need to yell at anybody. He needs to wield authority, but he doesn't need to take anybody's head off at all. There's an authority figure. A teacher would fall in the same category. I would say even a corporate boss, for the most part, should fall in the same category. Calm authority.
Yeah, so I want to bring us back to the original point with one more, I guess, as a topic, but also question, which is in one taste, we learned the skill of bottoming, or we learned about the skill of bottoming, which is like the opposite of topping, a kind of influence, maybe used in a manipulative sense sometimes, but like this idea of almost guiding the top, so to speak, into what's good for you. And I'm curious what you guys think about this idea, both sexually, but also perhaps in a non-sexual setting.
I'm a huge fan of the art of submission for everybody. I consider submission and surrender a religious practice. To me, surrendering to divinity, surrendering to inspiration is a human mastery. When in doubt, surrender. Truly, when in doubt, surrender to authority bigger than yourself. I'm completely in favor of us having that mastery within ourselves. So I'm never against it. I teach that to my DOMs. I'm like, when in your doming, dom from your heart and dom with reference to higher power. Don't get too full of yourself. Right? So I am completely in favor of us truly holding something above ourselves and holding that energetics that I am not the top of the hierarchy. I think it's a very psychologically damaging place to be. It's a psychopathic place to be, to think I am the top of the pyramid. I am not the top of the pyramid. There's always a bigger force above me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd start there for myself and for everybody else. Absolutely learn submission, absolutely learn to surrender, and for God's sake, place something above yourself. I think this is the problem with atheists, that they don't have anyone to place above themselves, and I think it's actually psychologically disorienting when they do that.
Well, yeah. That just makes me think of. I was having a conversation the other day about mastery, and in this is in particular was in music, but about and they're always their motto is that they're always learning, and that but if you in staying in that state of always learning, inevitably also becomes always teaching as you become more masterful, as a natural consequence of always learning, right? So
Yeah,
like maybe I'm just thinking maybe always surrendering also does something similar. Like always surrendering ends up being uh, like a model for other people to follow, in a way, to like as you end up being an authority on surrendering, which ironically is sort of a dom position for people. Like you're
right.
like I was
Yeah.
thinking of the therapy comment, me as an authority, yes, but I think of it more of like authority, authorization. Like I'm authorizing another to be their full self, to
Yeah,
examine themselves, to see themselves, to be themselves, to
absolutely.
you know, etc.
Yeah, authority figure doesn't mean tyrant. That's the whole point. You're there to serve. Hierarchy is there, supposed to be there to serve the people who are following you. It's not a tyranny, it's not a dictatorship. That's the function of hierarchy, is to serve everybody who's in the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We elect leaders to serve us. They are public servants, and that is the correct term for them.
Right, right.
We put them in office so they may serve us, and that is the correct modality. The teacher is there to serve the students. The pilot is there to serve the passengers. But if the pilot comes out and gives you a set of instructions, you should follow it.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're
Every
assuming the
hierarchy
pilot
functions that way.
is following some sort of higher rule book on how to fly the plane and not doing random things, which
Well,
gives him his
yes.
authority.
Yes, because then, as Jordan Peterson often talks about, hierarchies should be based in competence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
All legitimate hierarchies are based in competence. When they are not, they fall apart. When incompetent people end up on the top of hierarchies, shit falls apart. That's his complaint about people like Justin Trudeau. He's like, this moron should not be the president of Canada. He's really not qualified. He's really stupid. And he's a psychopathic liar, pathological liar. Okay, I don't know much about Justin Trudeau, but it's like this is a hierarchy that's not working. This is a country that's in trouble because we have a moron on top. Well, you're
Yeah.
Canadian, you can chime in on that. I'm
Yes.
just
Well,
thinking of that example because this just comes to mind of a
the
non-functioning hierarchy where competence is not the element that's at play.
the words choke in my mouth.
Yeah. Well, this with the spiritual aspect, I mean, it reminds me of a conversation, Joseph, you and I had, I think, 10 years ago. Like, understand, you were trying to get me to understand, like, why the higher power idea exists in recovery, because I didn't really get it. And I don't remember exactly what you said, so you can correct me if I am interpreting it wrong, but it's something like to think that you are in charge of everything in your reality is a very dysphoric experience as opposed to being contained. And yeah,
Yeah,
I might be
yeah.
mixing around what you're saying.
Or yeah, there's lots of ways of like one way it's said is like you don't need to know God, you just need to know that you're not God.
Good piece of advice.
You know,
Exactly. I mean I think that is the problems I see atheists running into. That if they remove God, they think they are God. I think even Nietzsche couldn't hack this psychological position. Even he went nuts. You remove God, and he's like, well, what's above me? Better put something above you.
right?
Put
Well, that
nature above
was
you. Something. The cosmos, the
I
universe, the Big Bang, whatever it is.
I think
But if you
that's
remove God and put yourself, you're going to go insane. Our psyches are not meant to be godly.
well, but I think that was the Nietzsche, you know, the gist of what he was saying was that was a dire warning. God is dead.
God is dead, and we are fucked.
Yeah,
If you kill
Yeah.
God, you're fucked. You need something bigger than yourself. We are not built to be the top of the pyramid.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to try to bring us, because we went a little off of our main question, which is totally awesome, but try to bring it back to and wrap a bow around this. Could we say that on the deepest fundamental, as demonstrated by sexual arousal, we're supposed to be basically contained and containing someone?
I think containment is a wonderful part of relating. I think all men should learn to contain their women. I think it's a very warm and intimacy generating energy to be able to contain each other, especially for men to offer containment to their women. I don't know what to say to it beyond that on a bigger cosmic level.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
it's
I'll
a
say, and there's
relational
a
piece.
reward. If you contain well, you create that positive feedback loop, that circuit, the result is in your body.
Well, if you contain
So
somebody well, to contain somebody well, you have to be self-contained, which means you have to be grounded
right,
yourself. And so that's a good start. You have
yeah.
to
I
be a
was
little bit sane yourself to make somebody else a little bit more sane. So
so
it's a
you
good
you know
prompt.
so advice to men who are you know wanting it is contain well, but put your own seatbelt on first.
Yeah, if you're
For
not
sure.
contained yourself, you won't be able to contain others anyway. Jittery people can ground other people. I think that's
Cool.
one of the other many reasons it's better to have a leader who's grounded and calm. Because one of the functions leader performs for other people is to calm and reassure the people who are following him. If the leader is crazy all over the place, that's actually not very reassuring. It's not very
Right,
grounding.
Yeah.
and
And then
so,
no one gets off, so to speak.
and
It's
and
true.
so, and sometimes if they're unlucky, scapegoated and sacrificed.
Cool. Well, I think it's a good place to end.